Our next speaker joining us is someone who is absolutely prolific because he has developed and executed a global strategy that has resulted in Deloitte becoming the leading professional services organization in the world and recognized as the strongest and most valuable commercial services brand. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking about none other than Mr. Punit Renjen, Global CEO, Deloitte. So it's time to deep dive into the next set of insights coming in from the leader himself, Mr. Punit Renjen.
Hello, everyone. Namaste. It's a true privilege to speak at the 7th Annual Economic Times Global Business Summit. If you told a certain young boy from Rohtak, Haryana, and his parents that one day he'd be speaking alongside the world's most influential business leaders, they wouldn't have believed you. It's been quite the journey since I sat daydreaming out of my classroom window gazing at the Himalayas. And it's a real honor to be here with you. That said, I wish we were convening under better circumstances. These are extraordinary times. What is happening in Ukraine is unthinkable. I don't think it's an overstatement to say the world will be forever changed by this. It's already a fundamentally different world than we knew even 2 years ago because of the pandemic. Together, Ukraine and COVID have given us a rare opportunity, an inflection point, and I see this as an incredible opportunity. I've often heard people referring to going back to normal, like we had it in 2019. 2019 was not nirvana. The climate crisis was raging, liberal democracies were under attack, income inequality was getting worse. We can and should create a new normal, a better normal, in the way we work, in the way we travel, in our investment in the environment, in how we define work-life balance. We can do better, and India can lead. India's growth and progress over the last decade has been remarkable, and I believe her potential is limitless. Our traditions align remarkably with where it seems the world is headed. Take well-being. India is the birthplace of yoga. Wouldn't it be great if the world woke up every morning with some Surya Namaskars? Prior to the pandemic, many, including me, were predicting that the next century will be an Indian century. This was based on the central role India had been and continues to play in developing the technologies of tomorrow, its large domestic market, and its ongoing contributions to the global economy. Now there is even more reason to believe this is where India is headed. And I'm not alone in that thinking. Deloitte recently conducted a survey of 1,200 multinational business leaders to better understand how India is perceived as a place to do business compared to other countries. Survey results indicated that many business leaders based in the US, UK, Japan, and Singapore are planning to make additional or first-time investments in India, and most intended to make them within the next 2 years. These findings have been validated time and again during my own conversations with C-suite executives in recent months. Among 100 plus CEOs I've spoken with on various issues, including supply chains and manufacturing footprint, all are factoring India into their growth plans, as is Deloitte. Today, I want to proffer 3 responses to how India can definitively make this the Indian century and take its rightful place at the global leadership table. 3 points. First, I believe India must be more open to foreign capital to boost investment, manufacturing, and participation in the global supply chain. Second, India needs to maximize the potential of its young talent by creating universal access to quality education. Third, businesses in India, working with the government, must increasingly prioritize environmental, social, and governance, the biggest threats we face as a global community. Let's start with foreign direct investment. For more than a decade, India's effort to attract FDI have been impacted by a misconceived law that enabled certain transactions to be retroactively taxed. The current administration, the current government, has since repealed this law and made several other game-changing moves to better position India for foreign investment. For example, the entirety of customs clearance, including customs bonded warehouses, has been placed on a digital platform. It's an important systemic reform in a country where trade is approximately a third of GDP. As part of the government's Make in India program to expand manufacturing at home, India's production-linked incentives, fiscal benefits, and regulatory clarity strengthen its linkages to new global supply chains. Kudos. But unfortunately, Deloitte's recent survey findings indicate that investors are still unaware of the changes India has been making. And this is particularly the case in Asian countries like Japan and Singapore. There is a disconnect between what is happening on the ground, initiated by the government, and the perceptions that are held. There is no doubt that there is a marketplace ripe for opportunity. While capital inflows last year reached record levels, India is going to need a lot more towards enterprises in the automobile, food processing, capital goods, pharmaceuticals, and electronic goods industries. It would reinforce India's strategic imperative, which is jobs creating economic growth. But I see confidence in India's resilience and potential. India has all the criteria investors are looking for. First, stable governance. Second, democratic traditions. Third, and importantly, the large consumer base, 1.3 billion people aspiring to middle class or above. And the core comparative advantage. India's comparative advantage of highly talented individuals is second to none. I think the biggest obstacles are going to be the country's long-standing challenges of income inequality and access to quality education. So let's talk more about that, starting with access to education. India is already home to one of the largest millennial populations in the world. And as you know, in the next decade, the number is only going to grow. It is expected that India will have the highest population of young people by 2030 in the world. But the jobs of tomorrow will focus on technologies like AI, cloud, and cyber. New skills will be required. Will India's young workforce have the skills to lead the economy forward? I believe it's a fair question, and one that I think will depend largely on what action both government and business take now. In my opinion, the path forward is clear. To attract foreign investment and avoid greater income inequality, India will have to maximize the potential of its young talent. And that will mean improving access to education and skills for all, including women and girls. I'm calling out women and girls in particular because right now 175 million women in India lack the education and skills to join the workforce and take advantage of this remarkable transformation that India is undergoing. Consider the impact on India's economy if more of these women were able to join the workforce and lift their families out of poverty. The reality is that everything comes back to education. It's the building block of society, the foundation. It will be harder to get to 5 trillion if we don't get this right. India's national education policy is a powerful start. But this is also a critical opportunity for business to step up. As a global organization that has had a presence in India for more than 125 years, Deloitte is keenly focused on doing our part, particularly around education. Let me just take a few minutes to enumerate. First, we're going to hire 75,000 new individuals, new professionals in India over the next few years. Second, we're investing hundreds of millions of dollars in new service offerings, technology, innovation, quality enhancements, and people. We're actually servicing the rest of the global economy from India. Working with leading NGOs in India, we're improving access to quality education for India's most underserved population through our global world-class ambition. This is something that I'm personally very proud of. We are focused on impacting the lives of 50 million women and girls in India through education and skill building by 2030. This leads me to my final point and final step, which I believe must be taken to ensure that the next century is indeed India's century. Prioritizing environmental, social, and governance standards. Our future on this planet is anything but certain. I have a 18-year-old child. I want to make sure that I leave this place better than I found it. I don't want to have him look at me back with chagrin when he becomes a man and suggest that I didn't do my part. I think it's really important for us to focus on the environment, on social, and on governance. If this pandemic has taught us anything, it's that there is still hope. There's still an opportunity for us to impact this. With business travel largely halted and fewer commuters on the road, we saw cleaner air. In fact, the lockdowns led to the sharpest reduction in emissions on record, nearly 8% reduction compared with 2019. I think on a personal level, it's worth noting that those mountains that I referred to at the start of my talk, that I saw from my classroom, they had been obscured for decades because of air pollution, but they were visible again. I have photographs to prove that. Remarkable. The message is clear. There is a better way. The journey to a better normal has begun. We just have to be bold enough to embrace the change. I do want to digress here for a second. It is not only the right thing for us to do, it is also the right business thing for us to do. At Deloitte, I have 350,000 professionals in 150 countries. 86% of them are Gen Zs and millennials. Their number one issue is ESG, the environment. One of the funnest things I do is speak on college campuses. We will hire 70,000 professionals this year. The question I'm asked invariably, whether it is in the United States and Europe, in India, is what does Deloitte do beyond its core profit motive? What does Deloitte do to impact the environment, the social infrastructure positively? So it is the right business thing to do. For India to continue to attract foreign investment, we will need to prioritize ESG in the cultivation of our economy. And we will need to do this in a way that does not interfere with our economic growth. I applaud India for the commitment that has already been made at COP26 to cut emissions to net zero by 2070, reduce carbon emissions by 1 billion tons by 2030, and raise the share of renewables in the energy mix by 50%. But this is not an issue government alone can solve. Collaboration across sectors on funding, research, and development efforts will be required to usher in a cleaner, greener future. For our part at Deloitte, we've made a commitment that we will be net zero by 2030. And we have a multifaceted program that involves leveraging our 350,000 professionals. But we are also working with other entities, NGOs, other non-governmental entities like the World Economic Forum, where we have worked to identify ESG metrics using existing standards to give businesses a common framework for evaluating their impact. These metrics are universal, relevant to long-term value creation, actionable, and will improve comparability of information for investors and other stakeholders. 150 companies already and counting have adopted these. Importantly, they also represent a stepping stone to the end goal of one set of globally consistent sustainability standards. In India, Deloitte has been actively exploring ways to directly support the country's climate objectives. This includes plans for planting trees, nature-based solutions, and reducing stubble burning. Deloitte has also been working with local governments on another issue of critical importance to India's future, health equity. When the second wave of COVID-19 hit the world, the tragic toll of an overtaxed healthcare system across the world was laid bare. There's been underinvestment in primary healthcare across the world for decades. If India hopes to build back better after COVID, primary healthcare infrastructure must be prioritized. With this in mind, Deloitte collaborated with the government of Haryana to narrow the gap in healthcare resources, particularly between rural and urban communities. Together, we piloted an initiative called Sanjeevani Pariyojana that delivered support and home care to those with mild to moderate COVID in Karnal district, thereby freeing up hospitals to provide care to more critically ill patients. Based on this model, we've developed a playbook to help other local governments improve their own responses to healthcare crisis in India and beyond, in places like South Africa. As I've heard some government officials say, this is India's gift to the rest of the world. I agree with that. I share this as yet another example of an opportunity for businesses to step up and help shape India's future. There's no doubt the road to the Indian century will be not an easy one, but India has proven that it has the capability to make this India's century. When I think about India, I only feel great pride and great hope. What this country has achieved throughout its history is remarkable. And this moment of resurgence is not the time to lose momentum. It's the time to continue to build. And I believe if the right steps are taken now with regards to FDI, education, and ESG, the best is yet to come. This is India's century. Thank you very much for having me. Namaste.